Okay, hi friends.
Hello, friends. It's Shanika and Caitlin with Get Checkered, part of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown and community supported.
We have a very exciting guest with us
Yes,
today.
we do. We're not alone. It's not. Sorry. And also, if you see cats, they're everywhere. But we have a wonderful special guest today, who's actually calling us from Austin.
Yeah, so we have Ross Fruin on the line. He is founder and CEO of GridRival. So he's actually calling in, yes, from Austin because he was at CODA this past weekend, and we are very jealous. And we will be brains later on in the episode about that.
But we wanted to start off with just tell us a little bit about you. I definitely looked you up on LinkedIn to prepare a little bit, but I think your background is so interesting. And yeah, just who are you? How did you get into motorsport? And what did you do before running your own business?
I think lots of questions in there. So if I forget one, let me know. So I'll start with how I got into motorsports, and that might segue into kind of how this whole thing started. I think in 2000 or probably 1999 or 2000, I was staying the night at a friend's house in high school, and his dad was from South Africa, and I remember waking up one morning really early, which is like the only way you can catch Formula One races where I live, in Portland, Oregon. They're all on at like 6 a.m. And so we had woken up a little bit early, and his dad was watching Formula One, and it was back in the Michael Schumacher, kind of Mika Hakkinen rivalry era. And I just remember him commentating on this race in his South African accent. And there was just kind of something about that really stuck with me. And I'd always been a car person, but I hadn't, I had not really fallen in love with motorsport. And for whatever reason that morning, it kind of hooked me. And then I really got kind of obsessive about it and kind of had this delusional dream that eventually I could, do this sport myself. But as you probably know, to race cars at that level, you have to be very, very talented and also very wealthy. And I did some karting at that age, and I was neither of those two things. So, I continued to follow the sport as a patron. Was a massive Michael Schumacher fan, through my teens and 20s. And then kind of in parallel to that, have always been an entrepreneur. My last business before I started GridRival was a digital marketing agency. We did a lot of work in user acquisition. We managed about $30 to $40 million of advertising spend on Google, Facebook, Instagram, and all those sorts of channels. So I kind of had a lot of experience with growing audiences, which parlayed very well into what we're doing today with GridRival. And GridRival started actually here at Circuit of Americas as an idea. It started as a side project. It was never intended really to be a business, and we'll probably talk about that. But so we stay in an RV every year at the Circuit of Americas, and in 2016 was kind of the tipping point. For a very long time, I had looked for kind of like a fantasy motorsport type product that was like fun and engaging and exciting, because most, in my experience anyways, most diehard motorsports fans are not traditional sports fans, or they're not as excited about it. And so I kind of grew up watching all of my friends play fantasy football and fantasy basketball and March Madness and stuff. And I never really was interested enough in the sport to partake. But I for every year for quite a while, I looked for a product that was interesting enough to compel me, and never found one. So kind of the tipping point was actually at this race. The first year I went and did an RV, the Thursday night before the race, I was inside our RV, and I could hear one of my friends that was staying with us outside yelling. And so I went to go see what was going on, and I get outside. He's watching there's like a TV on the outside of the RV. He was watching a football game, and he's yelling at his phone because his fantasy team was losing. And so I just remember that being the tipping point when I said, God, I just really want to make something that I think would be fun. And so that's how it started. And so the first version of GridRival was a, web only desktop app. You could barely even use it on a phone. It was really to scratch my own itch and try and make something exciting. And we ended up signing up the first year we launched it. We spent about $15,000 on ads, just to kind of see what would happen. And I say that it wasn't intended to be a business. I mean, like at the scale it is now. I did intend to have it make some sort of money. And, I was curious about what sort of opportunity existed with it. And so we spent some money on ads. Again, going back to that being my background, I had some experience there. We signed up 22,000 people our first 5 days online.
Holy shit.
Not bad.
Yeah. And so that's kind of
Wow.
that was the tipping point when I really started to investigate the space a lot more.
Mhm.
And I really started to dig in on both what was happening with fantasy sports, real money fantasy sports and sports betting. And I'm sure you guys have heard the names DraftKings, FanDuel, and some of those huge, huge entities were, by that time in 2016, 17, I'd raised $500 million each. And so the space was getting really, really exciting. I was unable to go do anything with it for a year and a half because I was still running on their business. I didn't feel like it would be ethical, or for a lot of reasons, it just wasn't the right time to leave. So I got that opportunity in 2018, at the very end of 2018, and then was able to go pursue GridRival full time in early 2019 and raise some early capital. And ultimately, a lot of the timing ended up being incredibly compelling. So in the United States, where I'm from, there was a piece of legislation that was repealed by Congress in May of 2018 called the Professional Amateur Sports Protection Act.
Yeah.
And essentially what that did is it was the government saying, hey, states, you can create laws around this if you want, and you can take bets on sports. It's still not federally regulated, which I'm sure we'll get into, which is it's a bit disadvantageous for startups in the US entering the space as operators. But luckily, a lot of our audience is in places in the world where the compliance is done at a federal level. So anyways, it just became compelling enough for me to want to go do it full time. When we did the research on how big the market is, as F1 fans, you guys know, I mean, we're not just F1 product, but the motorsports market in general is billions of people globally that view it every year. And the multiples that businesses were getting when they were selling or going public in this space was also compelling enough. And so I've been fortunate enough to continue working on it, and have raised, I think that we met each other because we closed our seed round about 6 weeks ago, as announced the last week exactly. And so we're just kind of focused on continuing the building journey and ultimately evolving. Everything right now in the product is free play. So it's all about kind of camaraderie, community, smack talk, fan engagement. And the ultimate goal is to take what we've built and apply real money games to it, and launch those in select states in the US, a good chunk of Canada and the UK over 2022.
Perfect. You covered literally everything.
Yeah, that was a lot of like our bullets in a row. Just
But
them in one.
I wanted to say for our listeners, 22,000 in the first 5 days it's huge, and it's the product market fit that I think every entrepreneur is always looking for. But to get it within the first 5 days of like, holy crap, this is something that people really want, it's really exciting. We're gonna take things a little bit of a step back just to talk a little bit about your team.
Yeah. Kind of wondering, with your company growing, like how have you built your team up, and what kind of qualities are you looking for in your first few employees and the employees moving forward?
Yeah, really good question. So to date, when I started, we had worked with an agency externally to kind of build what I would call an MVP, a minimum viable product, which was kind of that first thing we built just to test the waters and really get a sense for what the market was. And then we continued to work with them through about the first 6 to 9 months of when I went to do this full time. And we kind of just got to a point where we outgrew them, and I decided that it was going to be really important for us to find a full-time CTO, and kind of really a co-founder that was going to build the business with me early on. And so I hunted for 4 months, almost put in the same amount of effort I did when I was fundraising to try and find that person, because for that, one of the things we look for that's probably pretty obvious is we would obviously love to work with people who are passionate about the sport. It's not a prerequisite. You can still write great code. You can still make great advertising. You can do any role without loving, motorsports or even sports in general. But I think it's a unique opportunity because there isn't a lot of opportunity to work in motorsports in this way. as there would be if you were, wanting to go work at like a B2B software as a service company. And so that's a thing we look for. I think, outside of that, I can say kind of buzzwords that I think are things that we find interesting in people. One of them being people who are curious. And the thing that we hammer on in our hiring process is just testing and looking for humility in people, because it's really hard to build great teams and go fast when you're not humble. Most startups, that if they're successful, will grow faster than people grow. And so really, I think the one thing that I've seen limit people and personal growth is humility. When they can't look at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, I'm making a mistake, or hey, I can be doing this better, or hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need help. It makes it very difficult to have people that are going to evolve with the business as the business grows. So those are some of the key things we look for. And then obviously, skill fit is important too. But that's usually like kind of the last thing we test for in our hiring process.
Very cool.
I know these are, I'm also an entrepreneur. So all the words I'm like, yeah, that's you need someone curious, truly, because if they're not curious about the problem, then it's hard to move the needle forward. We wanted to jump into your app. So I was kicking around it yesterday. I think Caitlin was kicking around it today, or actually a few days now. But for someone that's downloading GridRival, or maybe new to the fantasy world, do you want to just talk us through, I guess, just the basics? Like, how much money does someone typically put in? I know that it's technically not fully monetized. We noticed that there are multiple leagues. Can someone go into multiple leagues? And there was also criteria for the fantasy points. So we're curious about that too. So if I'm a new user, how would I use the app?
Yep. So first question was multiple leagues that you're asking? Or I'll just walk you through kind of how the game works.
Sure.
I'll talk you through the gamification. So GridRival, our current game, and we have, this is an evolving thing. So we plan to add many different types of games and different models of games as we grow. But the one that we chose to launch with is something that we call a salary cap game. And so every user, once you join a league, and a league is just a fancy name for a group of people. They can be friends, family, people you never met. But it's a group of people that you've kind of all agreed to compete with each other throughout the course of the season. And the mechanism for competition is that every user in that league will start with $100 million in fantasy budget. And with that $100 million in fantasy budget, you have to sign 5 drivers and 1 constructor on contracts of anywhere from 1 to 5 races in length. So kind of across the season, you are managing this team based off of kind of your knowledge of the sport and knowledge of the drivers and the people and the constructors and stuff like that. And so there's really 2 major goals throughout the season. Number 1, obviously, is to earn the most points. That's how you get ranked against others. That's how you win your league. Number 2, and we'll talk about how points are earned in a minute. Number 2, and something that's a little bit unique to GridRival, is although you start the season with $100 million in budget, you can increase that value during the course of the season. And the way that you do that, which is advantageous, because with $100 million, you can't just go sign, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez to your team. That would be way too difficult. So when people start the season, a lot of them don't sign any of those people or team because it sucks up a lot of budget. And so the one way that you increase your budget during the season is, I mentioned the term contracts. And so if you signed, let's say you signed Esteban Ocon, and when you signed him, his salary was $14 million on GridRival. Well, if he has 3 killer races in a row and you sign him on a 3-race contract, and his value increases from 14 to, let's say, 16.5 over those 3 races because he did really well, that $2.5 million profit that you made will get added to your team's value. And so over time, like you'll see if you go to the global leaderboard, there's 60,000 people that started the season this year. Some of these people that are ranked in the top 100 have team values of 140 million because they've focused really intentionally and most likely on finding drivers who are undervalued in GridRival's eyes. And so that's important as well. But so the ultimate mechanism is points. And so we have 6 different ways that drivers earn points right now. So the obvious ones are race points, so race finish position, qualifying finish position. You get points for overtakes, and on our platform, that's net overtakes from your qualifying position to your race finish position. We have beating teammate points. So anytime you beat, which is big in Formula One, it's not necessarily big in every other sport, but as you guys know, with predictability of F1 and sometimes the gap between the constructors themselves, a lot of times these guys are really racing their own teammates. And so you get one for beating teammates, you get one for completion points. So just finishing the race, you get at different increments throughout the race, you get different points added. And then one that we have that's kind of been, so some people really, really love it. Some people don't like it as much, is called improvement points. And this was something that we did really to make picking lower ranked drivers more exciting. And so the way improvement points work is we track a driver, or in the case of, moto or a rider, we track their 8-race rolling average finish position. And if they beat that finish position and how much they beat it by will determine how many improvement points they get.
Okay.
The thought being, again, going back to like Esteban Ocon, this, if his rolling average race finish position was 14th, but then he had a race where he finished in 5th, he would get a ton of points, because arguably him finishing 5th is probably more of an accomplishment than someone like Lewis Hamilton finishing in the top 3.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of the six ways we have it right now. Over time, we're continue to think through that model and what makes it exciting. And then one of the big pieces of functionality we're excited to roll out next season is the ability for the administrator of the league, or the commissioner, as it's called in fantasy football, to really completely customize all that stuff to the way that they want their own league to run. So if they want the league to be entirely just based off of race finish position, or if they think the personal improvement points are too high, they can set them and control them. They can change how much salaries fluctuate up and down. So that'll be a mechanism that really makes the game a lot more customizable.
No, that's very cool.
At ATB, we make banking work for you by offering both expert and practical advice in saving, budgeting, and paying off debt. And though your financial situation and the economy may change over time, you can be confident that your money is safe and secure with ATB. We have a history of doing what's right for our clients, especially when times are tough. Because ATB was built to help Albertans. For more information, visit atb.com.
Yeah, so with the next set of questions, we want to focus specifically more so on the business side of things. Again, I don't know how many of our listeners know. I feel like we don't talk about our backgrounds very much, but I am an entrepreneur. So when I saw that you closed the $3 million seed round, huge, like
Thank you.
It's a big deal. You've talked about a little bit about the goals that you have upcoming for the app in the next couple of months, such as like having, or next season at least, more flexibility for people to run their own leagues. Is there anything else that you're looking forward to building in the next couple of months with that injection of funding? Because it's a huge deal. Like, congrats, honestly. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. The big thing, like I've always looked at fundraising as kind of, we always see these terms round, seed round, A round, B round. Yeah. And I really think the way a lot of investors look at that is in each one of those rounds, there's something that you're looking to prove, right? The first thing we had to prove in all this pre-seed funding and friends and family and angel investment money, really the thing we had to prove is that this audience was big enough and that we could acquire them at a fast enough rate, and that they were interested enough to make this venture scalable business, meaning that it can return investors 10 to 100 times their money over the next 5 to 8 years. And so that was really the goal. And we didn't think that we needed to have revenue to make that happen. And most people that invest money in the space understand that it's very difficult to get to the point of revenue, which we'll talk about. And so our goal with that first round was just to scale the user base as fast as we could and as large as we could. We passed about 120,000 users this year when we launched. So the goal for our next phase is to get real money games on our platform. So that's the number one focus that we have over the next 6 to 12 months. If you were starting an e-commerce shop, making your first sale is really quite simple. It's simple to get payment processors. It's simple to get banking relationships. All of those things are very, very difficult in this industry as an operator, because sports betting is, what I would call like a gray area in a lot of different places from a regulatory perspective. And so a lot of the payment processing companies require a lot more buttoned up businesses that want to go into that space. So you have to have anti-money laundering policies. You have to have a lot of procedures in place to prevent certain things, to keep people's, information secure. And so it's an expensive space to get into in that respect, but it's also, there's, some pretty significant barriers once you're through them for competition, which is great as well. So the goal with us is to launch our first kind of daily fantasy games come Q1 or Q2, where you can play with real money. And so the way that'll work is kind of essentially the game I just described to each of you a couple minutes ago on the season long side, where you're kind of signing contracts, you're playing through the whole season. The first version is we're going to basically take that same gamification, we're going to apply it to single events. So instead of joining a league for the whole season, you'll be able to join a league with, it could just be the 2 of you, it could be 10 of you, it could be 1,000 of you. And essentially you're betting money off of a single event contest. You're picking a team for a single event. And then that's the major focus. Then on, there's a lot of other small features and stuff we want to add to the season long side to continue to grow that out, because I think that's a really crucial piece for acquiring customers, because it's very social. We've had a very strong viral growth rate because we focused on making it really social. So we'll continue to invest in that as well.
So I have a question, and I am not in the entrepreneur world, so sorry. But, so what are your demographics like? And so let's say, I'm kind of assuming demographics would mostly be fantasy in North America, but tell me if that's wrong. But how would you plan to grow to the Europe, which has so much fan base for motorsport?
Yeah, so our user base today is maybe not indicative of what it will look like in 12 to 18 months from now. And I think that's a byproduct of what I had just said on fundraising, is like the thing we needed to prove coming into this fundraising round was that this was very widespread and people all across the world want to do it, and we could acquire them. And so we really spent a lot of advertising budget where we saw the lowest cost to acquire our customers in relevant spaces. And so one of 50% of our users right now are actually located in the UK of our active user base. And so that to me wasn't necessarily surprising, because the UK is a pretty densely populated place for motorsports fans, much more so than the US, which I hope feels like it's slowly changing, especially after what I saw this weekend out of the race. But yeah, so our kind of I think I'd mentioned our first markets for real money gaming are US, UK, Canada. I think with how hot this industry is, that's going to get us really, really far. But answering where we'll go after that is really hard right now, because my gut is wherever I told you will probably be different by the time we do it. Yeah. And the reason why is because this industry is incredibly dynamic right now. In large part because there's so much regulatory momentum in different parts of the world, because everyone's kind of, the US is certainly a leader in economics and a lot of different things. And so the rest of the world tends to follow things that we do from time to time. And so the sports betting craze is not an exception to that. And you have really big regulatory momentum in places like India and Brazil. As you guys probably know, Canada passed a single event sports betting law 8 weeks ago or something. And so a lot of those are done at the federal level. I think the verdict is still out on how Canada is going to regulate it. It's going to be at the I think province is what it's called level, or at the federal level. And federal is good for operators. Federal means, in the UK is a great example. We get one license for the UK and we can offer our games the entirety of the UK. In the US, it's very, very different. It's done at a state by state level, and it's much more exhaustive from a compliance perspective. So I think where we move after these 3 geographies is going to be a direct, if you can imagine a Venn diagram with, the 2 circles being passionate audience and relatively simply cost-effective regulatory climate, that's going to be the answer to that. And I can tell you where that likely is right now. But like I said, I think in 12 months, it may be totally different. But I think from a user-based perspective, yeah, I mean, you're dead on. The rest of Europe is huge motorsports wise. But there's also pockets. I was talking to someone this weekend about Australian Supercars, which is a series that's been on my radar. Huge. I mean, huge series in Australia. Something like 80 to 100,000 people attend each of those races, which is, I mean, that's almost F1 level depending on the venue. And so, the other thing that we're working on outside of just expanding in geographies is expanding in series as well, or a series as well. Because right now we have, the sport I was just at this weekend, and we also have MotoGP. But we also want to add IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula E, and a lot of these other kind of, call them feeder series or support series or whatever you want. But there's tremendous audience that follows some of these sports. World Rally is another one. It's a very, very unique sport, right? We'll have to think through the gamification of that in a totally different lens, because it's run in a completely different way. But the audience has quite a bit of overlap. And that was one of the things that really clicked this round for a lot of people when we were raising money. In the first round had this kind of single sport objection. Like, they didn't think a single sport platform would be able to be big enough to be venture scalable. And a lot of the people that looked at that in the US that didn't know and understand the motorsports ecosystem, I think really missed out on the fact that, like, NASCAR fans and Formula One fans look at those two sports as differently as a football fan looks at basketball, right? They both use ball, they both have a court field thing, whatever, and so I think like NASCAR and Formula One both have their cars, they have wheels, they go around a track. But I think that's where the similarities end. And so I think that was the big eye opener for a lot of these individuals this round, weakness of each of these sports, but at the same time, the overlap that existed in their fan bases.
I just wanted to say, I'm so happy. Like, one of our questions was just about Canada, because we always hear about all these amazing things that are happening, but then we're like left behind for 5 years. And some of it is because of regulation. And I have this feeling, though, it'll probably be provincially regulated because of the AGLC and stuff. So the good news is we only have how many provinces and territories?
Only 10 provinces, 3 territories. And the territories might cover one.
So it'll be easy. It's versus all of the states that are there. But yeah, I think it's exciting.
Yeah, me too. I think it's an exciting market for us. I know there's a lot of passionate fans out there. And on the daily fantasy side, the part that we're going to launch next season, Canada's a market where a lot of those types of kind of games of skill, quote unquote, can be run in Canada without a license. So for us, it's an obvious market to go into pretty quickly.
Do you think that the daily skills games that you're talking about can be a way to, because you said that they're one-off things that you can do, if it's a way to engage the casual fan of Formula One that maybe isn't like where
100%.
Or I guess
I mean, we've really built this for the casual fan, and I think if you look at the numbers that some of these huge companies like DraftKings and BetMGM and FanDuel say about the market, like a lot of them are projecting that they're going to grow 10x over the next 10 years, and the only way that's going to happen is through the enthusiast, in my opinion. And so I think the way that you engage the enthusiast is, and why we focused on making our games fun and entertaining outside of money, is because I think the entertainment value and the fan engagement value and the social value and the content value of the games themselves will be what engage the enthusiast. So speaking specifically about America, one of I think the audience that all of these brands that I just mentioned are going after right now is kind of like the diehard gambler. These are people that they've been doing sports betting before it was legal, or like in Vegas, they know what minus 250 means and what lines are, and all those sort of sports betting terms are very esoteric, and in my opinion it's quite unapproachable to do it at any sort of volume if you've never done it before. And so I think that audience is like this big, right? But I think that they spend a lot of money per person. I think the enthusiast audience is this big. They're going to spend less per person because for them it's about, we just put $50 on the weekend, my group we were with, right? It made us more excited. I cared about, drivers I wouldn't normally super be interested in because there was skin in the game, right? And so I think for the enthusiasts, that's really who our target is. Our ultimate goal is to have, a fixed odds sportsbook type product, excuse me. But I think the key in any, niche fantasy sports or sports betting startup is really captivating the enthusiasts through like high entertainment value products.
I agree.
I think, and I don't know if like, since you're not doing the monetized part yet, but looking into it for the future, like, is there a way that you can kind of protect and inform users about some of the dangers of gambling, right? Like, I do understand fantasy, not everyone has a gambling problem, but
Yeah.
I actually like, and I was forwarded a report that sometimes fantasy leagues are a prereq almost in a way. So I just wonder if there's like an opportunity, thinking about it before you even get into that monetized space.
Yeah, so we have there's quite a bit that we have to do on that as a byproduct of even getting some of the banking and processing, and in the UK even a license. And so those are generally kind of referred to in the industry as responsible play guidelines and responsible play settings. And so we have built into our infrastructure, once we launch this part of our product, the ability to self-exclude, for a period of up to a year. You can limit the amount of deposits that you make in a given period of time, the amount of contests you enter in a period of time, the amount of money you spend on a contest in a period of time. And then kind of we have to have throughout the site places where people can call and reach out to for help. And then, the extra mile that we probably plan to go to at some sort of scale is by watching user behavior. And you can see through backend use systems if people are doing things that could be considered borderline reckless. Like, we have a responsibility sometimes to protect them, depending on the license. Those rules are obviously different. This is where the nuance comes in from, what does Canada say and what does the UK say and what does Pennsylvania and California and all the different states say about it. And it seems to be that there's probably about 80% overlap is my guess. But generally speaking, it's something that we take seriously, that we have to take seriously. I think that the industry has to take seriously to protect, the people who do kind of have problematic behavior. Ultimately, I'd say too, the games really that we're building are not conducive to addiction when it comes to gambling, because it's, at least in the beginning, the games that we're building, like I said, going back to them being really high entertainment value, are not the type of games where people are going to be playing with thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars at a time. I think what's more likely is people are going to be playing I would guess the average wager over time on the platform, again, speaking about purely when we're just daily fantasy games, is going to be, $100. So that will change eventually when we go into more of a traditional sportsbook type product. And it's something that we'll have to constantly assess and, iterate based off of what we see.
Yeah, you touched a little bit on just emerging industries and things like that. And I'm curious because sports betting, sports tech, and just the space in general is rapidly growing and has been growing. I feel like more people are paying attention now. Just as crypto and NFTs and Web3 is going, and we've seen some overlap already with Formula One. I know Red Bull signed a deal with, I forget who, but Pierre Gasly dropped an NFT. Do you see the app? I mean, we're talking, it could be like happening tomorrow, but maybe later down on the roadmap. But do you see the app playing into with those industries as well, the emerging Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think right now, like us, because we get asked this a lot, like, what's your crypto strategy? And like, what do you do about NFTs? And, how are you going to utilize blockchain? And I think like, I'm excited about all of those technologies in different ways. I think right now we have certain things we have to focus on, and getting distracted by trying to like make some sort of NFT play, I think is time that's like money, not building the core things that we have to build and prove to investors. And so I'm excited about them. Like I'm very bullish long term on the utility of NFTs. I think right now there's a lot of hype, and so I think they're probably overpriced. But I think the utility of an NFT is what's more exciting. Very similar to the utility of crypto, which essentially is blockchain. I think there's going to be a lot of like there already is a lot of like non necessarily financial uses for it. And I think what's exciting to me about an NFT is the ability to track and maintain a ledger or the authenticity of a digital item. And living in a digital world, I think that's going to have a ton of implications going forward. It's just that everyone's pushing these things out right now, and the amount of money I've seen some of these things sell for is like mind blowing. And I totally might be missing out. And like, maybe we talk in 5 years and I said, hey, I made the biggest mistake of my life, not just buying a trillion NFTs. Yeah, I am really excited about it. I think that like there is opportunity with us going forward. It's not something I've put a tremendous amount of brain power into, kind of for the reasons I said earlier, but it's a space that we're excited about for sure.
Yeah, I actually think looking at maybe the public in general, it's just also so new for just the everyday person. So it's like if your app is going to bring in these sports enthusiasts, then it's also like, is that even a language that they're even aware of? Or is it something that they're talking about amongst their friends? So I think I mean, we have to ask because you're running a sports tech startup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
I have a question here. Shaq actually wrote it, and I'm going to try and sound like I know what it is. But what we know about sports tech, there are several touch points like stadiums, venues, fan engagement, sponsor engagement, fantasy, and then of course sports betting. So could you see the app and the GridRival brand being more integrated with other touch points as well?
100%. Yeah, I mean, my goal is ultimately to make this the most ubiquitous product amongst the motorsports industry, so that when fans want to play, free play games, season-long fantasy, daily fantasy, sports betting, that this is the brand that everyone knows to go to. So I think there's a lot of implications long term. Again, we have time to deal with to get us there, right? But I could very much see us have in certain venues have on-premise products, right, where people can interact with us in real time at an event at a physical location. I think there's a lot of opportunity to create white label products for maybe feeder series, right? Series that don't have millions and millions of dollars to go to build this type of thing on their own. And so I do think, I don't know that I see ourselves in every single channel or medium that you mentioned. But I think like, I do plan on it expanding outside of kind of the ecosystem of just being a mobile app. But I think not for, another probably 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. You touched on it. I'm going to ask about Coda now,
Yep.
But you touched on it a little bit. Do you want to let us know before we start recording about what you had set up at Coda and how you were able to kind of engage people? We heard he mentioned something about a trailer, so I want to make sure our listeners know about it too.
Yeah. So since 2016, I think I told you the story about kind of when this started, but in 2016, I rented a trailer. I went to my first Formula One race at the USGP in 2012, which was the first year it came here. And I left that race kind of loving F1. It was great to see it for the first time, but never wanting to deal with that level of crowd volume again in my life. I remember I waited like almost an hour to use an ATM machine at one point. Ooh. And so in 2016, I had a friend who, like, I don't even remember the context or the setting anymore. But he was like, it'd be cool to like get an RV and go stay at the track during the race. And I was like, I've always been like kind of high action person and make things happen. So I was like, I think it was like literally like the next day or week that I like booked this whole trip. And so the first year we did it, we had like a 35-foot Winnebago and we stuffed 8 people in it. And just kind of every year that we've done this, and this is our 5th, I believe, 4th year in the RV. Every time we've done it, we've kind of learned things. And so now, as kind of a business expense, I had a lot of meetings out there, and we had a really interesting setup. We kind of had 2 spaces with some tents, and we partnered with another brand locally in Austin, and just kind of threw a party for the weekend and used it as a business development tool, which was really, really cool for the first time to be able to kind of intertwine the sport I love with the business I love, which is one of the things that made this really interesting from the beginning. But yeah, we're out there every year. We plan to be. So if you plan to be there in 2022, come say hi.
Well, okay. So we know Miami's coming on the calendar next year.
Yeah. Do a 2-step. I like that.
I unfortunately can't. Miami's not going to have any sort of RV parking or any sort of like on-premise living at all. And so given what I know is going to be going on in our business and my life and everything at the time, I don't know if we're going to be there this year. I might personally be there, but I don't think we're going to be there in any sort of fashion like we were in Austin. I might show up myself if I can, get a decent ticket, but they're limiting that event to 80,000 people, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be one of the more expensive venues, at least. Anytime you have a first year, it gets a ton of visitors. So that combined with the fact that they're not going to be at full capacity, I think the tickets are going to be pretty expensive relative to the Austin Grand Prix.
Fair. Looks like we might have to sell our livers.
That's fine.
We have just a set of fun questions, but does your GridRival, the brand, the app, do you partner with any motorsports teams right now? And if you don't,
we don't currently. Yeah, we don't. Well, we have a relationship with Team Hardpoint Racing in the IMSA GT Daytona series, and that's via. So the gentleman that wrote the first check for this business back when I started 2.5 years ago was a guy named Rob Ferriol, who is now a professional driver in the WeatherTech series. He races a Porsche GT3R. And so via kind of his investment and passion or what we've been building, our name's kind of always on the side of his vehicles. He's been a very, very generous partner in that way over the relationship with them. But long term, I think partnerships with the leagues themselves are going to be much more what our focus is. My goal ultimately is to become kind of the tool of choice for people that want to play daily fantasy and get kind of the exclusive rights with some of the leagues. And I could see ourselves at a certain time when we can justify the expense of promotion or advertising on the side of a car, investing in that. But I think that's a long ways out, just because I think what we can do through digital and the fact that it's so direct response, I think until we're really talking about marketing budgets in the tens of millions of dollars, I don't think that team partnerships are probably on the table. But it is something I'm excited about, and I think the league partnerships is going to be a big opportunity for us as well.
I like it.
This episode of Get Checkered is brought to you by Rumi.
Hi there, I'm Brendan, a certified home inspector with Rumi. Do you have a problem that needs fixing? Whether it's big or small, inside or outside, let me help you find out what's really going on. You can call me by phone, or we can take a look together over video chat. Visit rumi.ca, that's RUMI.ca, and go to Ask a Home Inspector to book your appointment with me today.
Yeah, I think that's great.
We're going to ask you some fun questions about F1 right now.
Cool.
Okay, do you have a favorite driver and a favorite team?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I'm thinking about. I'm going to answer this like current, because I'm thinking about it in current context. I think favorite driver is definitely Daniel Ricciardo. I would really love to see him win a championship. Love his attitude.
Down a river in Austin this weekend, hey?
Yeah, I'm sure. Not surprising.
He became a full Texan. Truly, he got off that plane and was a Texan.
Yeah, he loves it here. I think second to him, a huge Lando fan. I really think George Russell is gonna. I'm super, super excited to see what he does next year. I think he's just like, I mean, maybe it's just his accent, but I just think he's for his age. I mean, I did not sound like that when I was 19 years old. I was not that. I didn't have that vernacular. When he gets interviewed, and he seems like he's so sharp and really put together and a really smart driver. And so he seems like a very calculated individual. And that race he had last year, I forget what circuit it at, where he stepped in for Lewis when Lewis had COVID.
Yeah, it was Sakia.
Yeah. His performance kind of spoke for itself. I think is one of the reasons he got that ride this coming year. So I'd say those three are current. I mean, former, I was too young, or not too young, but I just was not into Formula One in the Senna era. I think I'm a huge Senna fan. My girls, I have two daughters that are 6 and 8 right now, and they really want a dog. And it's not going to happen yet, because until they kind of can prove that they can be responsible for my dog, me and my wife we don't have time to take care of a dog. But we do have an agreement. We do have an agreement that when they get a dog, the dog will be named Senna.
That's cute.
Oh, I would
That's
love
cute.
that.
So they kind of always talk about like, when are we gonna get Senna? But so I think that I would have been instead. I was a huge. I mean, Michael Schumacher is really what got me into the sport as deep as I got into it. I was a huge Michael Schumacher fan. I just remember watching him drive a Ferrari. It's like it was the thing I did on Sundays. And I think I have a lot of memories. None of them very specific anymore, but just a lot of memories of watching those early races in low definition television, on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. So he was always really exciting to me. Yeah, I think that's it for right now.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite teams or any teams that you're like, oh, they're doing something interesting or you're having your eye on?
Would it be McLaren if you like both Danny and Lando?
Yeah, I'd say if I'm fairly like team agnostic.
I like that team agnostic.
Maybe we need to.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I like it.
Maybe constructor agnostic. I think like what's interesting about McLaren is someone was talking about this weekend is, next year is going to be a pretty dramatic change in Formula One for a lot of different reasons, but one of them being the budget cap. Mm-hmm. And someone I was talking to said they knew someone that did a lot of research on the team's budgets and their current budgets and how close to the cap they were. And McLaren, if you can imagine a ratio of like spend cap to current, like if you compared what the spend cap was going to be to the current points they had achieved or their current success level, McLaren was the most successful based off of like how much they were going to have to cut to make it to the budget.
Okay.
And so that was an interesting conversation around what might happen next year, because essentially the argument was like, yeah, Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes are performing, well, maybe not Ferrari this year, but Red Bull and Mercedes are definitely performing a lot better. But if you look at their budgets, they're going to have to cut hundreds of millions of dollars to make the spending cap. And so I've always been a McLaren fan. I love McLaren vehicles. But it's always fun to watch a team come up too. I mean, if you followed them for the last 5 or 6 years, like they had some rough years in the early days of the Honda engine. And to think that they could finish in third this season is pretty cool to watch. I'm super interested in seeing what happens with the kind of the rumors about Andretti Autosport.
I know. Thought there was going to be an announcement this weekend, and we were ready, and it just didn't come.
Yeah. So that'll be fascinating. I really think this sport needs an American driver. It's obviously grown. I mean, this is the 5th time I've at this race. I've never seen crowds like this before. So I think the combination of the pent up demand from no race last year, but I think ultimately it's Drive to Survive and the amount of new fans that the sport has captured. But I do really think if we had kind of an American version of Daniel Ricciardo, it would be a good thing for the sport in a lot of different ways.
Definitely.
So I think like Andretti Autosport might be an avenue, being an American team that could try and push that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. It's been unfortunate that it hasn't been something that Haas has tried to be intentional about. But I say that with quite a bit of ignorance, because I have no idea behind running a team and signing driver contracts and all that sort of stuff. So
looking at so obviously this season it's been wild between the two leaders, Lewis Hamilton and Max. We're going to put you on the spot. We have to ask you this question. Who do you think is going to win it all in the end at Abu Dhabi? Mm-hmm.
If I was to bet my money, I think Max will. If you look at his points, he had, and I'm trying to remember, he had a DNF recently when they kind of, him and Lewis bumped together. I think it was at Silverstone, wasn't it?
No, they bumped a Monza, did they?
Yeah.
Was that Monza? Yeah, it was Monza.
Like that,
on top of each other, Or
no, well, so that was the double. They both went out, but there's one where Max went out too. I think
Silverstone,
yeah, when they were going around the corner and kind of he got squeezed off, and
Baku, yeah.
Excuse me. If that hadn't happened, he would be even further ahead. And I just think he's got a fire in him. He wants it. It's real bad. Lewis is his 8th time. It's like, not that he's not competitive. I also secretly really want him to win. I love Lewis. I think he's been an amazing thing for the sport. I think it's impossible to argue he's not the greatest driver who's ever lived.
Yeah.
Just purely by statistics. But I think a lot of people are ready for a new champion. And so I'm hoping, I'm gunning for Max. And then next year maybe we'll be gunning for George Russell, Orlando.
Nice. Yeah. Do you think so? If Lewis doesn't win this one, will he ever win the 8th title? Because like you're saying, Mercedes is going to have to cut so much from their car.
And also they've been in George Russell.
I would bet against it, just because I think before the current formula change, the Mercedes Petronas team was not that. They didn't win a lot. They had Michael Schumacher on their team, and they were kind of a midfield team. And when they switched this V6 turbo, they just knocked that out of the park, and their engineering talent. And I don't know if that was a direct byproduct of getting more budget from Mercedes. I don't know the backstory. But this new car is going to be so different with a combination of the budget restrictions. I think there'll be a shakeup next year, which will be really good for the sport. So I think if Lewis doesn't win this year, unless Mercedes still happens to have, the best car coming into 2022, then I think it's going to be tough. And I also think George Russell, I think Valtteri is a good driver, but I think George Russell is going to give him a run for his money. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, when I was like 20 or 18 or 19, saw Michael Schumacher hit his 7th world championship. I remember so confidently saying, like, there is nobody that's ever going to beat these records. It's never going to happen. It's impossible. And he's obliterated him. He got 100 wins, and I think Schumacher had 72 or something. So yeah, I wouldn't. I'd be hard pressed to bet against him, but I think that if it doesn't happen this year, I don't know how excited he's going to be to try and hit 8.
That's actually a good point. I'm hoping that he hits 8 and then can retire.
It would be good for the sport too, right?
Yeah.
For him to have that.
Well, we'll see.
I don't know.
Aside from Formula One, which is obviously what we love, what are some other motorsports that you enjoy?
Yeah, I'm getting in more and more into MotoGP, because we added that to our platform this year. I think MotoGP is fascinating, and it's kind of just like Formula One was here, a decade ago. It doesn't have a huge viewership in the US. It's honestly kind of hard to watch here sometimes. But just the way that they throw those bikes around and the precision they do it with. And then I think one of the things that's still fascinating about that sport is it's very unpredictable. You have riders that start at the back and finish at the front. You have races that come down to the last 1,000 feet, which are just things that you don't see a lot of in kind of some of the larger auto racing series. So I'm getting more and more into that. Formula E hasn't totally pulled me in yet, but I'm fascinated by what the future of that sport looks like, because the world is obviously going more and more electric. I'm an IndyCar fan. I do really like sports car racing, so I follow IMSA, and we have some drivers in IMSA that had leagues on our platform this year, which was cool. And I like the nuance of IMSA and the different, the fact that you can have a Ferrari and a Porsche and a Lamborghini and all the different vehicles on the same track at the same time, with a whole nother different level of car. So those are probably the ones for now. Trying to get more and more into oval track and NASCAR to really understand kind of the nuances of that as we progress into adding some other stuff to the platform. And I'm a big IndyCar fan too. It's been fun to watch, Romain Grosjean and some of the other Formula One drivers end up there and be happy with it and start to perform. So I think he's going to I don't forget what team he's going to next year. I think it's Andretti Autosport. I could be wrong, but
yes,
So he's going to a team next year. I think he's going to be really well positioned to do something cool. And I think IndyCar is a bright future. It'll be interesting to see what Roger Penske does with it and kind of what his vision is for it over the next decade. And hopefully he can do for IndyCar what Liberty has done for Formula One.
Yeah.
We don't have any more questions for Formula One.
No, none. But now it's just all the.
But am I allowed to ask, are
Yeah, of
you a
course.
part of any leagues in your app?
Yes, of course, absolutely. I'm part of a lot. I'm part of a lot of different leagues. I don't participate fully in all of them. I have about 3 or 4 that I'm really watching every race weekend. So I have one with some of the team at GridRival, and then I have kind of my own league that I host with with some of my friends. But yeah, I kind of limit it to 4 because I put a lot of time into it. So I'm actually ranked one of my teams is ranked 55th globally right now, which sounds like kind of obvious. Like, right, the founder should know how to play the game, but it's actually very you gotta do your research to do really well. And sometimes circumstance switches things up. I didn't finish well at all last season, but I put a lot of time into it, and so I try not to. We have a model that's kind of different from some of the other things we've seen in racing. A lot of racing platforms that we've seen some of the leagues themselves build are this model where you kind of manage a team and then you can attach it to a bunch of different leagues. And we did the opposite of that because we think that wasn't a very social way to build things. And so the way that our game works is when you join a league, you're essentially selecting who you want to play with more than you are the team. And so you manage, if you're in 3 different leagues, you're managing 3 different teams, much more like traditional fantasy football.
That's
so it can be time consuming to be in.
That's a lot to figure out. I think we should try it for
we're
next
definitely
season.
gonna
Get
try
our
it.
listeners aboard too. So we're kind of at the end, but you got that injection of cash, which means that got to know, are you hiring? And if so, are there remote positions?
We are hiring remote positions. We're currently hiring 2, actually I'll just say 3 or 4 engineering roles, kind of 2 really senior and 2 more junior. And so those job posts can be found on gridrival.com/careers. And I think that there are links out to them. And then, we're always looking for passionate folks that think they can help. I know that in the next 12 months, we'll be hiring full-time product manager to really kind of take the reins from me on some of the product stuff as I go focus more on business development and, building the team and leading the company, and really talented product designers too. So those are shoes we'll be filling, not today, but probably start hunting for those in the next 6 to 12 months.
Very cool.
And
So
those roles will be very important for someone to really be passionate about the sport. I think there's a handful of roles where it's not as important, but anytime I think we're talking about product or design, it's going to be pretty critical.
there. So we're wondering, for our listeners, where else can people learn some more about GridRival besides downloading the app? Of course, you guys should download the app.
Yeah, no, I think that's the best way. You can download the app, and once you get into a league, we built a thing called a game guide this last year before the season started, and you get to listen to yours truly. So there's like 4 or 5 videos where I kind of walk through. They're all about 1 minute to 2 minutes long, and I kind of give an overview of how points work and how salaries fluctuate and all that sort of stuff. I think that's the absolute best way you could kind of drink through fire hose a little bit and learn the game.
Okay, very cool.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us. We're very
My
excited.
pleasure.
And
Yeah,
to our
thanks so much for having me.
listeners, we'll definitely be doing this next season.
Yes,
For sure.
Yes. So join our leagues.
Please. If you don't,
Please do.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you.